Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Bob Kudla. Bob is the owner and creator of TradeGeniusAcademy.com, and I am very happy to have him back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Bob, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being back once again. And there is so much happening right now, and it seems like the deep state, they're flipping out. And whenever a certain group loses control, what they normally do is they like to censor, they like to block people from what they say. And we're already starting to see that the tech giants, they're getting a little bit worried about what is happening out there. I mean, I know that Trump started this whole thing. Listen, if you're being censored, please give us the information, give us the screenshot, tell us why you're being censored. What is happening with nationalism, with the big tech giants? I mean, are they afraid? Are they worried? What's going on here?
Yeah, on the what I would call the globalist progressive side is that, politics to them is a religion. And this is not unlike the Catholic Church in the 1400s that started losing control with the Reformation. And so they started the Spanish Inquisition. And I see it as the same kind of thing, is that if we don't like what you're saying, we don't want what you're saying to affect other people. So instead of debating the issue, we'll just silence you. And so they can't do it like China does with a social score. So they outsourced it to the big tech companies, and the three big tech companies are all run by progressive globalists. So they're just happy to come on board under the mantle of eliminating hate. But they redefined hate as anything that I disagree with you about. And they're very, very afraid of nationalism. And I think some of it has to do with, giving them the benefit of the doubt that when countries tend to look inward is when you tend to have, wars in Europe. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff is coming from. But at the same time is that they create these environments that cause these wars in the past too, because when you suppress people to a point and you take away their economic freedom, they have no other choice but to blow up into some sort of war or conflict. And so, I think they're trying to solve it by censorship and try to keep the people comfortably numb, but it's not working. I think people realize, look at all the elections with the climate change stuff, right? The Finns, the Dutch, the French, Australia just last week. I can't really call Brexit that. Brexit's more of a control over our life kind of a thing for the Brits. And the United States was, it really started with President Trump. So I see this as a force that can't be stopped. People call this racist, but really people like to be around their own tribe. And what I mean by tribe is, you want to be as local as you can, as the people you could touch, you could taste, you could hold accountable. That your neighbors that you can count on, versus, you and I were talking right before the show, the guy, Junker, that he's like, hey, I'll do all the rules and you can't do anything about it. And I think people are reacting to that as well.
Yeah, I want to get into May and the Brexit and what's happening with Angela Merkel and how she's lumping us into with China and Russia. But first, are they tech companies, are they worried that they'll be broken up? Are they worried like something like Trump and the administration might say, something, we need to regulate this?
Yeah, I think they're scared witless. I think they know that if they push this too hard, and it's interesting with President Trump is that he's a man of extraordinary patience. He may be bombastic with his tweeting, but he waits. He has really good timing on when to do things. He knows that if he shoots too early on this tech stuff, that it won't get the play it's going to get played. But he knows before the primaries come that he's going to have to level a playing field for the advertising for the politics. Yeah, so the tech people are starting to play back and saying, hey, we're team players and you don't need to break us up. But I think they're going to get broken up. I think they're going to be considered a utility or a publisher, or they're going to have to divest in their, just like they did with Microsoft, in terms of being able to break apart their different operating units so they can't cross-sell and cross-coordinate. And I think, Apple's going to probably run into the same issue themselves. So, yeah, I think they have a right to be worried. And And if that doesn't happen, Dave, quite frankly, is I think you'll see alternative media that will become dominant, just like with AARP when they sided with Obamacare. This new company called New Day showed up. You don't have to stay AARP; they sold you out. You can go with New Day, so it's a conservative version of the AARP. I think we're going to break into those kind of camps. You're going to see probably progressive social media. You'll see conservative social media, and then nobody will be talking to each other anymore. So they'll get broken up one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we definitely see a movement right now. I mean, you mentioned it before with Australia. We see it with Italy. We see it with so many different countries today, even with France, with Macron. I mean, we have Le Pen running against him. And I do believe that people are starting to wake up all over the world right now. And they're starting to realize that, everything is not what it seems. And they're starting to push back on all these people. And like I said before, Angela Merkel, I think she's starting to realize that her globalist ambition, where they were trying to push this on the world, it's starting to fall by the wayside. And now she's lumped the U.S. with China and Russia. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, this whole globalist thing is not globalist at all. It's Europeanish. The Chinese aren't globalists unless they get to define who they get to dominate. The Japanese aren't globalists. The Indians aren't globalists. The people are globalists to the point where it benefits them. It benefits the Europeans the most because they don't have the resources, and they don't like the fact that United States is a dominant power. And so they now look at it and they see themselves surrounded, which is really ironic. You got the U.S. to their west. You got the Chinese and the Russians to their east. They got the Middle East and Africa to their south, and I think they're in a precarious position here. And they thought they could probably control the shots, with a globalist agenda run by the UN and run by the EU, and they're not being able to carry it anymore. So she's lashing out, and I think she's really mad because even internally, her people are rejecting the globalists because they had to live with the policies of it. I was talking to you before also about, things don't matter to people till they matter. Everything sounds great. Hey, we need to bring the migrants in. They need a place to stay. Everybody's like, yeah. Then you put 5,000 in your neighborhood. What are you doing? And then all of a sudden they commit crimes. They don't have a job. They won't learn your language. They have a different religion. Next thing you know, the politician's out of work. And I think that's what's happening more and more. People are like being imposed upon by other people's high ideals that don't have to live with it. And I think that's what Merkel's lashing out at. The Franco-German model is blowing up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it sounds good in the beginning when they say, oh, you know what? These people are looking for asylum. These people are looking for some place to go. And it sounds great, but there was an underlying agenda which people didn't realize, at the time where, we're going to bring in not just, a couple hundred, we're bringing in thousands and we're going to try to blend the countries together. And do you think they were trying to do this for the globalist, one world government type of thing?
No, I think it's even more practical than that, is that they wanted to dilute the white Jewish Christian vote. And so the way you do that is you bring people in that are dependent upon the people who brought you in that don't look like you. And, just like in the U.S., if the Mexicans were white Germans, the Democrats wouldn't be rushing them into the country. So they were able to maybe dilute the vote and create a triangulation. Now you got this voting bloc that's poor and is dependent upon the progressive who brought them in. And oh, by the way, every time you rant against those people, you're automatically a racist versus you brought a whole bunch of poor people in that don't have jobs and now are committing crimes and don't believe in the way we believed in things for 1,000 years. So that's what the Germans and the Dutch and I think the Swedes are waking up too. I have friends that live in Sweden. They're like, they can't even go into the cities they grew up in because it's just it's a nightmare for them. They lost control. And so, so I think it's just vote counting, to be honest with you. And they figured they could control it and they could create a bunch of minority blocks that they can manage and stay in power. But it didn't work.
With the movement, with everything changing, like out in the UK, we see that she's having a huge amount of trouble. It looks like she might even resign. And Nigel Farage, he's making huge gains with the rest of the world seeing this, like you said, with Australia, where Morrison, I believe, the mainstream media was completely shocked that he won. With this change here, do you think there's going to be a very big change in the economic structure? Because it seems like we're moving out of that globalist model now and moving into a nationalist type of model. So do you see change coming?
Yeah, I think we're going to go to bilateral trade agreements. I think at the end of the day, you and I talked about this last month about, well, we have a trade agreement with China. I said no, you said yes. But when I think about it, we're going to both be right. It's going to be the deal we're going to have with China is that this is what we absolutely need from you, China. And that's what you're going to be allowed to import into us. And oh, by the way, this is stuff you have to buy from us. And beyond that, we don't really want you to have any kind of dominance in our economy anymore. And you're going to see that across the board. People are just going to trade for the things they want versus allowing global corporations just to move monopoly pieces around the table to get the cheapest labor. I think those days are over. So yeah, and you can see it. Trade is collapsing around the world. And for that reason is that, countries are all in debt, so you can't trust the currencies. And number two is that, people don't trust the dominance, especially China. It's not just a U.S.-China thing anymore. The Europeans are scared witless about what China is doing with the Silk Road. Australia and China are going to war over telecom and iron ore. Canada and China are going to war over them arresting the executive, and then they try to retaliate. So people are like, okay, do we really want to deal with this entity that's doing these kind of things? So yeah, I think it's going to collapse. I think, and it's a good thing, and for the United States, it's a really good thing because that's what's been draining our wealth for the last 25 years is this global trade agenda that basically wiped out the middle class and basically made us a sharecropper to, China, Japan, and Europe in terms of, we have to now beg them to take our treasuries and they can withhold that at any point. And then we don't have any jobs here. Service jobs aren't going to carry the day. You need a good mixed economy to be able to weather the different storms. And I think that's what Trump always had his eye on. And I think he's accomplishing it. So there's going to be no going back with China. And I think the tariffs are going to be used to pay for the infrastructure, to be honest with you.
Now, during this time, since the trade deal didn't work out right at this moment, we saw the stock market, it went down a little bit, but you still had some good winners with your trades. You were getting good percentage of profit and things like that. When you were looking at gold and you were looking at Bitcoin, looking at natural gas, these were some of your winners. How were you able to weather the storm of, everything being in flux?
Yeah. So, the gold and silver miners did a really great first quarter. Second quarter, they started to sell off, and then the cryptocurrencies just absolutely took off. And so we just basically looking at money flow, and we're looking at relative strength, and our indicators tell us to buy those things that we see the money flowing into, and you start selling those things that aren't going to be able to maintain their momentum. So that's what we're doing, and now we're back rolling it back again. Now where you're going to see the infrastructure plays, you're going to see gold and silver and the miners come back in here on the third quarter. But I think cryptos are probably here to stay because of the instability with the currencies around the world. And you can see, I think Bitcoin's made a move to 8,000. It's consolidating now, and probably within the next month, it's going to make another move to 10.5. Or a gold today, originally gold sold off, and now gold today had a huge move. On the basically gold and silver and cryptos are kind of like the yin to the yang of market instability. So as the markets get unstable, which they are right now, you're going to see gold, silver, and the miners move higher. Natural gas has no choice. We're going into a global solar minimum. The heating. I live in Southern California. It was 50 degrees this morning. We don't get it this cold. It rained yesterday. We had thunderstorms. It doesn't happen. And so the weather patterns are changing. People have to keep their heat on longer. And the other thing with natural gas that people don't realize is used in fertilizer. So when they finally get these crops into the ground, they're going to have to quickly dump fertilizer on them to be able to have a corn crop or a wheat crop or a soy crop. And so that's something that people don't understand, that those those fuels are used for fertilizer as well. So we just look for opportunities. And then with uranium, there's a deficit. And with Trump is acting right now with protecting national interests, the Senate right now and Trump are working on basically these supply chains of locally produced minerals. We don't want to be reliant on rare earths from China or strategic metals from Russia. And so we have those minerals in the U.S. So they're going to start protecting those industries. And uranium is one of them. So that's why we're excited about uranium. And we think there's going to be explosion, pardon the pun, in the price of those minerals. And we're going to be in front of that. It's going to be a great opportunity.
So you mentioned that Bitcoin, you're seeing the upside to Bitcoin right now. Are you nervous that the same thing's going to happen that happened last time? Remember, it went all the way up to like 19,000 or something like that, and then it fell down. And people were like, "Oh, see, it was a bubble." Do you think that Bitcoin's in a bubble again, or do you think this is?
No, it doesn't. I think that bubble that happened between early 2017 and 2018 was because the Wall Street got involved in trying to create a futures market. So they took the price, and you have to realize this is a limited amount of Bitcoins that trade on the open market. 80% of it's being just held. And so when you have it's called a small float, they were able to lift that thing from $9,000 to $20,000 in basically 2 months. And then when they opened the futures exchange, because they needed the contract, they need the coins with the contracts. And as soon as they opened the exchange, they started selling against that and brought it right back down again. And then people panicked. But now we're going into what's called a halving. And that means that it's going to be starting next year. Only half the amount of coins are going to be created per event. And then after that, in 2021, it's going to be an infinitesimal amount of new coins being, so that the supply is drying up. We just saw Litecoin go up 500%, Dave. It still probably has another double in it before it finishes its halving this year. And then next year is when the Bitcoin goes through its halving. So if Bitcoin just simply follows the Litecoin model, which we don't expect it to not, is that, you're looking at right now 8,000 times 5, you're looking at $30,000-$40,000 for Bitcoin. And so, yeah, we're pretty confident that it's going to make another run past these old highs. And then we'll just have to wait and see what the world looks like. So that's our view on Bitcoin and Litecoin. Ethereum is probably going to go over 400. Our head trader on cryptos, who's scary good, is he's putting a $425 target on Ethereum. And then, some of the other coins that people have practical value are moving as well. So we're pretty bullish on the cryptos. We never were not bullish. We were just careful as it was being sold off. We made money all last year trading those as it was going down. And now that it's going up, it makes us look really smart because it's easy when things are moving your direction. But it moving up, it will. And it's going to continue. So that's our view.
What about gold? I mean, do you still projecting gold going to be going up by the end of this year?
Yeah, I just put a note out this morning on one of my videos that with this move today, it's completing what's called an inverted head and shoulders, which will probably bring it up to over 1,500. And once it gets there, Dave, it's at shooting distance of its all-time highs. And look, make no mistake, the only way these guys are going to try to stay in power is they're going to just print their currencies like there's no tomorrow. And once the United States decides to do that, and I think that's when they conclude whatever arrangement they're going to have with China, call it a trade deal or call it permanent tariffs or whatever you want to call it, they're going to start spending money like there's nobody's business. And they're going to put that infrastructure out there. They're going to spend $2 trillion. And that's when you're going to see gold and silver and copper and uranium and vanadium, all that stuff's just going to rocket because they're going to be extracting it and it's going to have collateral versus, cheap dollars out there in the marketplace. So, yeah, so we're bullish on that as well. And then oil is a collateral. Oil may go down here a little bit, but, the traders use oil as a collateral. It's just like, to them, it's like liquid gold. They store it in tankers and they borrow against, that oil, those contracts to buy other things. So that's why we're bullish on what we're bullish on. And I don't see any changing whatsoever.
Now, I know Trump is a gold bug. He likes gold. But if gold starts to move up, and I know I've asked you this before, doesn't that expose the fiat currency? Because, right now, gold is low And if gold starts to move up, people start to say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? I mean, if it moves up quick, I mean, if it moves up to 2,000 to 2,500, people start to go, whoa, something's going on. I mean, that's an indicator. Isn't this going to be a problem for the fiat currency system?
The central banks have been buying gold for the last 10 years. So I think once they let gold go, like they did before, it's because they have enough of it. I think they're going to have to go back to some sort of hard currency standard, whether it's a gold standard or a gold/oil standard or some sort of mix. They can't. The fiat's going to be worth nothing. It can't be paid back now as it is. There's no mathematical scenario that does not allow payments of the debt to be paid off, unless you're doing what Europe's trying to do, which is really essentially a tax on the rich, is that you go negative interest rates. But if you go negative interest rates, gold and silver are going to fly. So, because people are like, well, why would I want to hold dollars in a bank that they're charging me for when I could just hold gold and silver and maintain value? And I think it'll fly, and that's when cryptos will fly too. And that's going to happen. The Federal Reserve's already talked about it. They already have the plan, Dave. None of this is a surprise to them. They know they can't do this, and so they're going to spend the infrastructure, and then they're going to go ahead and manage these interest rates down, and they're going to tax the rich, just like they figured out how to tax the middle class with Obamacare. They're going to tax the rich through negative interest rates. It's really clever. They just do these things that don't look obvious, so they can't be blamed, and they use the Federal Reserve kind of as a proxy where they can all yell at the Federal Reserve, but nobody can hold them accountable. So that's what I view as. That's why I'm bullish on anything hard, commodities, gold, silver, Bitcoin, anything that can't be counterfeited. And real estate, if you get the right stuff.
But won't this hurt the Fed? I mean, if they go to negative interest rates, like you said, people be like, well, why do I hold in cash if I can have gold if I'm getting negative interest rates? Won't this eventually destroy the Fed if they continue this? How long can they do it for?
Well, I think depending on what kind of politician you are, the liberal progressives use the Federal Reserve and the central banks as their piggy bank. The conservatives don't feel that way. So they're like, the Federal Reserve does me no favors. They just allow the welfare state and the liberal progressives to buy votes. But I think Trump's a hard currency guy, and I think he's a collateral guy, and I think that's what's going to happen is that I think the Fed experiment is going to be over. The other thing I sent over to you too is I think food's going to do it. That's going to be the black swan that people do not realize is that we're going into this grand solar minimum. All of a sudden the climate people have changed their view on this. They're like, cold is the new hot, like orange is the new black. And because they know this is coming, Australia, Dave, is the fourth largest exporter of wheat in the world. They have to import wheat from Canada this year. Scary. United States, we should have over 2/3 of our corn crop in the ground already, 30%. And if we miss the window, our yields are gonna drop for the first time in years, and we're also gonna have a 10 to 12% shortage, which is gonna send corn prices through the roof. Well, all the animals in the world are fed corn. So you're going to see pork prices, chicken prices, beef prices, turkey prices, all that stuff's going to go up. And it's also going to put China in a really hard spot because they're devaluating their currency at the same time they can't grow enough food. And so that's where the Arab Spring came out in 2011. And I think that's the one thing that's going to trap the central bankers, because you can't be China and Japan and print currency at the same time you have to import oil, natural gas, and food. That's called regime change. And I think that's what's in front of these guys. And I think that's going to end the Fed faster than anything else.
The last thing I want to talk about is the trade deal with China, because the mainstream media is out there saying that these tariffs are going to hurt the everyday consumer. Do you see the tariffs hurting the everyday consumer?
I think to a slight degree. I think we have to expect to pay more if we're going to bring in wages that are higher back into the country. But I'll give you a real life example, Dave. I own, up until this year, a solar energy company. I've owned it since 2006. And, and I put my money where my mouth is. I would not import Chinese panels, even though they're 30% cheaper than the Japanese and the South Korean panels. And even if a couple of United States manufacturers. I ate the whole margin. I ate it. I didn't pass it on to my customers. Number one, I couldn't if I wanted to, because I wasn't making the market. I was following the market, and which most people are. And number two is I just couldn't bring myself to be different than who I am. And a lot of people are that way. So we may see a bump in prices, but the thing that people don't realize is that people aren't making more money. So they're just not going to buy the product. And so it's going to be eaten all along the way. The Chinese producer is going to have to eat it. The importer is going to have to eat it. The retailer is going to have to eat it. And they're going to pass a little bit on to the consumer where they can. But the tariff is probably the best weapon we have. And because if China devalues their currency further, we just raise the tariffs even higher. So yeah, I'm not too worried about the tariffs, especially on our end. We're an importer. We're not an exporter. If we're an exporter, then I would have a whole different story for you. I would say tariffs are awful, but we're an importer for most part. And the other thing too, people don't realize 14% of our GDP is trade, 50% for China. And from China is probably 15% of that. So we're talking 1 to 3%. It's not a big deal. It's just a big deal for the people it's affecting.
Do you still see a recession coming in 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, I'm still of the camp that they're going to be able to push this thing right through to the next election and then let the whole thing sell off. Because look, all Trump has to do is sit down with Pelosi and Schumer and say we're going to spend $2 trillion. There's no way you're going to have a recession. This morning, the jobless claims were again at record lows. So I just don't see it. And you would start seeing the stresses of it. It's just not happening. And, unless something really weird happens, I think they're going to be able to manage it all the way through the next election. And then that's usually a second term for a president. They usually let it go then. And then you get a 1 to 2 year pretty good recession and then come out of it 2022, 2023. So I'm sticking with that forecast.
Great. Bob, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work and sign up to your Trade Genius Academy?
Yeah, so you go to tradelikeagenius.com, and then we put some bundles together for your listeners, Dave, till Saturday night. And you can, if you're a beginner or experienced trader, we have signal services for stocks and for cryptocurrencies. We have chat rooms for both. We have really cool software that we get to load onto the TradingView software that's available on your PC that you can have access to. That we're basically calling it the ultimate indicator. We call it the money maker. It just shows you when you ask me about buying and selling, it shows when the buying pressure is coming, when the selling pressure is coming, and then you're able to manage trades that maybe we don't follow. And plus, we have personal training, and we have, we also have classrooms that are on digital, and you can just download and learn just about every aspect of trading we have available to it. So yeah, it's a really good deal. We're doing really well. Cryptos are rocking right now, and so that's where a lot of money's being made. And like I said, the things that we follow are doing just fine. So thanks for letting me talk about it.
No, thanks for being on here again. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all the great information. Bob, thank you very much for being on here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Have a good day.